Hello everyone. Today we will study about living world. The world in which we live. What is the diversity in this living world and what are the criterias to differentiate between living and non-living beings or things? There are some criterias which are common among living and non-living things. And these criteria cannot be considered as defining property of a living organism. So these are the non-defining properties, the properties which are common among living and non-living organisms. For example, growth. We usually say that the thing which is living always grow. Yes, that is true. That is absolutely true. There is no doubt about it. But growth can also be observed in non-living things. For example, sand mounds. And how is that? If you see that there is a sand mound present near your house or anywhere and there is no human activity which disturbs this sand mound, there will be collection of the sand on this sand mound. And what will happen? This sand mound will start growing, or we can say it will increase in mass. This increase in mass is nothing but growth. So by this increase in mass, we cannot say that this sand mound is living. This is the most common example of non-living things growing. Particularly if we see in living organisms also, there is increase in mass, there is increase in weight, and that is why we say that something is growing. If you take example of mountains, as the time passes, the mountains also increase in mass. They start growing. But that does not mean that these mountains are living. So we cannot say that growth is the defining property of any living organism. Like this only, reproduction. Reproduction cannot be considered defining property of any living organisms. Why? Because basically reproduction is multiplication. Something that multiplies means it reproduces. Right? But there are many examples in living world only that you must have heard of the organisms which cannot reproduce. For example, the most common example is of worker bees. Worker bees cannot reproduce, but we cannot say that these are non-living. Like this only, mule. Mule means khachar. Mule is an economic animal. Usually, mule is used to lift up weight or to move weight from one place to another place. Mule can also not reproduce, but mule is living. So we cannot consider reproduction also as the defining property. These are some of the common examples of non-defining property or the properties which are common among living and non-living organisms. Beside these properties, there are some criteria which are considered as the defining properties or defining criteria for any living organisms. The criteria which can only be seen among living organisms. For example, metabolism. You all must have heard this word in your 10th grade. Metabolism is the process or series of some chemical reactions which occur in an organism. And which are necessary for the organism to survive. Metabolism includes two basic steps, and these are catabolism and anabolism. See, there are many reactions which occur in our body, and in some reactions there is breaking down of some components. This is known as, or this process is known as catabolism. And there are some reactions in which there is building up of components. The most common example you can take for both this metabolism, catabolism is making up of protein or building up of protein. You all must know that protein is the polymer of amino acids. Different or similar amino acids bind up in a chain-like structure to form protein. So proteins break down into amino acids whenever needed, and amino acids build up protein whenever needed. So this reaction can be considered as metabolic reaction, in which there is catabolism as well as there is anabolism. So each and every living organism will have some of these metabolic reactions. That is why metabolism is the defining property of any living organism. It has to occur